This is the Idaho Gubernatorial Election Interviews with John Webb. The interviews are brought to you by Stein's Family Foods in Osborne and Kellogg, Elite Lawn Care in Osborne, and Building Maintenance and Supply in Wallace. The interviews are made possible by Channel 3 News, Suddenlink Communications, and the Wallace High School. Here's tonight's interviewer, John Webb.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Idaho Gubernatorial Election Interviews. I'm John Webb, news anchor and managing editor for Channel 3 News. Throughout this special, we'll take a look at the gubernatorial nominees, Republican Brad Little and Democrat Paulette Jordan. We asked each candidate 3 individual questions impacting their campaigns and 5 of the same questions. We first interviewed Paulette Jordan at the Wallace Coffee House and then Brad Little on his bus tour across North Idaho. We flipped a coin, and tonight we'll start with Representative Paulette Jordan, followed by Lieutenant Governor Brad Little. We hope you enjoy. Representative Jordan, thanks for joining me this morning.
Yes, thanks for having me as always. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. So I'm going to start this interview off with a question that I'm asking both you and Republican candidate Brad Little. Why should an Idahoan vote for you in this upcoming general election?
You know, for me, I'm closely connected to our community more than any other candidate. I live here in North Idaho, in Plummer, in fact, which is a small town, very rural. And of course, I'm there closest connected to the people who are suffering and hurting the most. You know, our education system is overly challenged. We have defunded our programs. A lot of our schools are seeing less resources come back to our communities. We're struggling to keep our teachers within our school system. Of course, in jobs, when it comes to logging, our logging community needs more support. We have resources that should be available, that should come via our taxes that we're paying. And even those of us who are paying more taxes than others, that's a challenge in itself. But I see that what people really want is not only honesty but transparency in government. And they're going to see that in me. Of course, I've served in the State House for 4 years, and I see where a lot of the problems persist. So, our challenge is to work at this together. And for me, I'm all about independence versus my opposition, who's a statist. I'm someone who values not only rights and local control, but I want to limit government to the extent where we're allowing local citizens to be a part of the decision-making process. And I think that's going to be a major difference between myself, who's a progressive conservative, versus my opposition, who's more of a corporatist. I want to make sure that we are defending the people and cutting taxes for working families and cutting our sales tax and growing our economy so that our economy can truly benefit not only education but healthcare, and of course protecting our public lands, which is also one of the vast differences between myself and my opposition, because I'm big on making sure that public land stays accessible to our public good versus selling it off to corporations or privatization to wealthy billionaires who come into Idaho and think that they can take over our land. So I'm here about protecting our future and protecting our current resources for everyone's best interest.
Thank you. Why did your campaign manager and 2 other staffers resign?
They actually did not resign. It comes down to, it's interesting that you want to ask this and stir up drama, but it always goes down to the simple matter of fact that campaigns always have transitions, and you can have disagreements as well. No campaign's perfect, and this is what happens with growing pains. We have a lot of people who are really invested into volunteering, thousands of volunteers, and we keep growing every day. We have a lot of new people who we just grow. We've doubled our staff size and communications. We have a lot of people who are growing into our field team, so we've doubled our field team. On top of that, we have more people shifting into being lead roles in management and comms. So if we even have a new executive assistant who's being far more helpful, because we have a lot more people who are wanting to do more events, always requesting that we come visit their towns or their communities, their organizations. So we have a lot of demand, and because of that demand, especially with press and everyone else who wants to cover this campaign, they're seeing that we're creating a movement, and because the movement is so big, it's above and beyond us, and I think that's really the challenge, is you're trying to keep up with that growth. But some people can't always keep up, and it's it's unfortunate, but we do love the people who are able to challenge themselves, and they make stronger commitments, and a lot of people bring in different resources and different talents and skill sets, and So we're thankful for everyone who is able to build in the best way that they can.
But don't you think it's kind of strange that these top officials resign just weeks before the election? And we saw this in your campaign in the primary, just days before the election. You don't think that's odd?
Not at all, no.
An article from the Idaho Statesman claims that you have ties to a super PAC called Strength and Progress. It's a political action committee that accepts donations from the Coeur d'Alene tribe. You, of course, served on the tribal council. What is your relationship with this PAC?
Well, no relationship really. I mean, this PAC is not owned by me. It's owned by an outside individual. The tribe has the right to give to any PAC that they want if they so choose. This is not part of the campaign. That money cannot come to the campaign. So it was twisted a bit, and unfortunately, I think for folks who don't understand what PACs are, what they do, they may somehow misconvey that to be associated with us. So it's not in any way connected to the campaign and nor myself. So.
A new study by Boise State University shows that 56.8% of Idahoans believe that we need to focus on growing new industries like technology and computer sciences. What are your plans to attract those industries?
Well, we have to grow incubators, and my big point is to create what we have, especially because you talk about growing industries with ag. The Farm Corps is something I want to create, which is much like Teach for America. I want to be more innovative about how we approach agriculture into the future, especially as we have farmers who are aging out and are looking for ways to protect their crops, to protect their businesses, and ensure that we get younger people to build into the industry. And University of Idaho is a great place to start. Universities can serve as great not only research institutions, but economic incubators for local regions. And for us, we have to establish opportunity zones, especially for rural points of Idaho, and create these points to allow small businesses to grow within, but to utilize these relationships with the universities, local schools, building in our young people like yourself, who want to get into broadcasting or getting into carpentry, getting into apprenticeship programs as such, and then of course, because the future of work is constantly shifting, future work means artificial intelligence is on the rise. It means that people are getting into coding and data software management, and so we have to keep up with all the talent, but all the new jobs that will be available on top of the way the world is constructing itself. And as if our kids, if they're not able to be applied through new programming that isn't keeping up, then of course they're going to see major challenges and barriers. So as governor, my intent is to ensure that we have these programs available to educate our people to transition into these higher paying jobs. And then of course even getting our young people into voc tech training where they want to get into apprenticeships or getting into carpentry, or even a lot of these roles that you often don't see people talk about, which is plumbing or electric work. We have a lot of new jobs still available because we have also our older generations, which are our baby boomers who are retiring, leaving a lot of these jobs open and available. So I see more vested interest in young people wanting to get right into those fields too.
Okay, that brings me to my next question. Boise State University surveyed 1,000 Idahoans on multiple issues facing Idaho, and education came out on top. 25.5% of the surveyed rated education in Idaho as poor. First of all, why do you think that is, and what would you do as governor to improve that rating?
Yeah, education is always on the top of people's minds. It really comes down to education funding for lots of folks and opportunities at whether it's K through 12 or higher education levels. People want to see greater success rates, and it's unfortunate because rural Idaho often is the last on the bus when it comes to seeing those resources come back to our communities. People are paying the taxes that go into the general fund, but then they're not seeing those resources funnel back as an investment towards our future. They have teachers who are being paid less and less. We are ranked 50th in the country when it comes to teacher pay. In fact, some school districts have schools that are opening up starting first day of school without teachers in those classrooms. So we have this major and massive teacher shortage that is growing. And as we continue each subsequent year with less and less teachers, that becomes an issue for us in rural Idaho. Boise, as a school district in itself, is not seeing those problems. It's become its own taxing district. It was established before the state even became established into statehood. So what I would like to see is us shift back local government responsibilities to local authorities, and stop preempting people at the local level. Of course, I think this is an issue because it comes back to discretionary spending. Every school district has its own needs, whether it's trying to apply money to hire more teachers or increasing teacher pay or building in new programming so that they're able to be more innovative at the local level, apply advanced placement programs or get into honors education. There are also dual credit programming that needs to be applied to, especially for rural. They want to give more opportunities for kids to go on to higher education and still have higher education be affordable, and that's one way. But there's multiple challenges still. People are having to open up supplemental levies, and people are being overtaxed at the local level. So there's a challenge because sometimes those don't always pass, and if they're not able to get that additional funding, then they're cutting back on kindergarten, they're cutting back on special programming, gifted and talented programs for our young people. We're cutting back on music and these like wood shop, and we're cutting back on extracurricular activities, language arts, and so we need to be able to do more with what we have, which is less. But yet, this is why, as governor, you need someone who's going to prioritize education. So my priorities are to fully fund K through 12, bringing us from 2006 to 2009 appropriation levels, and then reassess through a comprehensive plan that's inserting not only the growth of inflation, but also the growth of our enrollment increases, because we have not only a vastly growing state and population, but we have more needs, more interests. And as we're seeing in career and voc tech training, or voc tech programs in Boise, that isn't being applied to the rest of Idaho. So a lot of rural districts want to see more career and voc tech programming in schools, and I think that this is where we can really emphasize the need and apply appropriations through discretionary funds to our local schools. And then of course I talk to people about this all across the state because they know that education is a major area of interest, and they want to get our resources shifted from our prison system to education. And so I said really one of the best ways to build up our K through 12 and higher ed is to build a stronger foundation for our youth, and that's through a universal pre-K program that's an opt-in educational service that's going to be available and should be available to every single Idahoan, regardless of what your income is. And I think that's what really would be the best way to build that foundation and to really address education needs in our state.
Idaho has an overcrowding problem within their state prison. We're listing a 607-bed prison in southwestern Texas. Idaho has transferred 306 inmates to that facility, of course with taxpayer money. They predict to have about 700 inmates in that facility by November 1st. How will you as governor address this problem?
First, we have to start shifting our people back out of the prison system, end those contracts so that we're not shifting our taxpayer resources out of state. And then because we have so many issues with how we even process our criminal justice system, which needs to be reformed, reducing minimum mandatory sentencing is a way to start. Making sure that we decriminalize cannabis, because that in itself, with our high arrests in cannabis, whether you have a small amount or whatever that may be, the fact remains that we would save $23 million alone just in decriminalization, and we would keep our people out of the prison system who are in that overwhelming gap of nearly 50+% within the prison system based off of low-level offenses and drug crimes. So drug abuse or mental health issues that have plagued our society are shifting them to our prison system, becoming a greater expense. But on top of that, the high recidivism rates. We need to reduce our recidivism rates and keep our people back home through educational programs, preventative measures, which is, for me, all about early intervention, which is why education is so critical in this regard. And of course, rehabilitative programming. We have defunded services to promote rehabilitative programming at the local level. So I think that would be a way to contribute to lowering our prison rates as far as how many inmates we have in our prison system, because right now we have this overwhelming growth, and over 8,000 people are in our prison system, and that has to stop. We have to make sure that we are supporting and serving our people locally, and then keeping our people home, because most of our folks, especially on low-level crimes, they want to be contributive to society. They don't want to be stuck in the prison system and then they're on low slave labor, basically, which is unfortunately the case for many. They're being paid 10 cents an hour, and it's ridiculous, because no one can fend for their family in the prison system, especially if you're a single mother or a single dad, trying to defend your family within those walls and having not one opportunity to get out on good behavior. And so there's there's a lot of issues with the prison system that we need to fix in our criminal justice system that needs to be reformed.
Representative, as you know, Idaho has been under Republican administration for 23 years now. The primary results show Lieutenant Governor Brad Little with 40,000 more votes than you. What is the possibility of winning this election?
Huge. We have more people in the state of Idaho who are independent like me, who are here from Idaho. You know, I've been here for thousands of generations, and my family is deeply connected to the land. We're very sincere about how we operate. Because I live amongst the people who are most impoverished in our community, you know, I'm directly connected to the issues, and I listen to folks. You know, we're going all over the state of Idaho, touching upon every town, every community, making sure that we're talking to every man, woman, and child, ensuring that we're building up our plan that's very comprehensive based on the needs of the people. And I think ultimately that message in itself, it's not a political ploy, and people are seeing that heart-to-heart connection, that level of compassion is needed. So we're inspiring people who once voted Republican, people who once voted Democrat, people who say that they're independent or just unaffiliated, and everyone who is like us, and this is what a progressive is. It's a base of people that are inclusive of everybody. You know, so we're really building up an Idaho family rather than dividing and destroying our public good. So for me, this message, it's becoming very indicative that we're inspiring people, building a renewed faith and sense of hope that's it's going to be followed on that we're going to be able to actually apply the solutions. You know, as a national business leader, a businesswoman who's been very successful in this path, you can see that apply over to the state, and we're already building up solutions as is. We're working with the best people in the country, people who have been advisors to military generals, people who've worked in the Pentagon, people who've served in high levels of office, and they're all being able to contribute to our broader solution here in our state. And so people are seeing that we are going to be able to save taxpayer resources. We are going to be able to cut taxes. We are going to be able to invest in education and make sure that everyone has access to affordable and quality care, healthcare system that is integrative and holistic, that can help people into the future. And our children deserve prosperity, and they'll see that with these the plans that we are putting forward. So I think that all in all, regardless of what outdated data may suggest, they even thought this in the primary when they said, she'll never have a chance. She'll never win. She doesn't have the numbers. The polls don't suggest that she can win. However, polls never are the case. They're never spot on. And people always prove elections wrong. People will turn out because our state is not a Republican state. It's an independent state. And if you look at the data, over 40% of our state is identified independent of the voters. And then there are a vast majority who also don't vote. And if we had more people turning out to vote who register and then get to the polls come November 6th, or even vote early or vote by mail, you'll see a significant turnout and a significant change. And I think that will be truly the success of Idaho, is them participating in their government again, and then showing that regardless of which side of the aisle or whether they're aligned with any political affiliation whatsoever, for me that doesn't matter, because I'm above the party system. I'm neither Republican or Democrat. I'm simply Idahoan. And because of that message and because of my own values and my own principles that I stand on, that to me is what drives home to people that they're electing not a politician, but an Idahoan who can lead, regardless of her age or gender or background, but she simply believes in the people and she's fighting for the people.
Since 2014, the state of Colorado has pulled in over $500 million in tax revenue from recreational marijuana. That's according to an article from CNN Money. Half of that income went into public education. What do you predict for the legal status of marijuana in Idaho? And how might any form of legalization impact citizens across the state?
It's interesting that you ask that, because today the Mormon Church just released their support for legalization of medicinal cannabis in Utah. Here in the state of Idaho, there are a good majority of people that I meet who are very favorable to legalization of medicinal cannabis. And as a candidate myself, I've definitely touted that if we legalized medicinal cannabis, we would be able to both tax it and regulate it. And those tax revenues will be able to support education services, of course, public health, going towards resources that can go to transportation. Public transportation to me is one of our areas of need. I want to make sure that we're connecting the rural corridor of North Idaho all the way to the south and eastern region of our state. I think these kind of the new revenue that could be generated from legalization of medicinal cannabis, not only as an alternative medicine, but being able to apply to our revenue base, would be helpful in terms of growing our economy. So I look at it as a multi-function, because there are also people who are seeing cannabidiol oil needing to be legalized, especially for parents who have children with, struggling with epilepsy and seizures. For those who have seen a need with medicinal cannabis, they're able to address, their Parkinson's or arthritis and cancers. So there's a plethora of needs or ailments that are being addressed via medicinal cannabis.
Would you propose the legalization of recreational marijuana?
I wouldn't oppose it if the people decided to push this in on an initiative and then we're able to get it to the ballot. I would definitely support and be in favor of the will of the people.
Lastly, last question, name one nice thing about your opponent, Brad Little.
We definitely don't have any particular disinterest towards each other on a personal level. I met his wife. I think she's a wonderful lady. I think he has a good family. Again, I always think just in terms of a person, especially when I had my primary opponent, I always thought the same way with A.J. Blukoff, that at the end of the day, he's a father and a grandfather and a husband to somebody, just the same as myself. We all have our families to go home to. So, I try to look at someone on a humanistic level. So, I think we're all good people.
Okay, so I'm starting this interview with a question that I'm asking both you and Democrat nominee Paulette Jordan.
Okay.
Why should an Idahoan vote for you?
I think, my experience, whether in my not too long political career, but whether it was my leadership in agriculture, business, philanthropy, or education, in all those fields I've had statewide leadership roles. And so as a rancher and a business person, I had an opportunity to go around all over the state and find out what's important to people. And I believe now that I've got high confidence that I can administer the state, hire the right people, implement the right policies to where young people like yourself will have the best possible opportunity to thrive here in Idaho.
On your website, you claim that you'll lower taxes and cut wasteful spending, but not only have you voted for a bill in 2003 to bump the state's sales tax from 5 to 6, you also made recommendations to increase gas taxes. If elected governor, would you really lower taxes?
Well, what you left out of that was the fact that when we increased state sales tax, we lowered property taxes enormously. That was so that we didn't hurt education. And if you remember 2006, right up here in this part of the state, there was a lot of concern about rising property taxes, so we offered property tax relief, and to keep education whole, we raised the sales tax. But we also, more importantly, we put $100 million away for public schools, so when the recession came, we did have to cut public schools, but we didn't have to raise taxes, and we didn't have to significantly cut public schools.
A new study from Boise State University shows that 56.8% of Idahoans believe that we need to focus on more industries like technology and computer sciences. What are your plans to attract those type of industries?
Well, I believe we do. I think that poll reflects what's taken place. Some of the fastest growing industries in Idaho are advanced manufacturing, software, services, and hardware. And, it takes a while to build the infrastructure. We got a new computer science program up here, a combination between NIC and the University of Idaho. We've got a computer science new college at Boise State University. We're doing a lot in the Idaho Falls and Pocatello area. You can't just snap your fingers and have a software industry. You got to build it from a base, and that's literally one of our fastest growing industries.
You've worked with the state legislature during your 2 terms, as Lieutenant Governor. What are your goals concerning our state budget, and how will you work with the legislator to get it approved?
Well, I've got a pretty good track record. I was elected by my peers into leadership my second year in the Idaho legislature, and I've got a good track record there. We want to do both in Idaho. We want to invest in education, invest in our infrastructure. We have to continue to grow the economy. That's how we're going to pay for that. We've been doing all that at the same time we've been lowering taxes. You pay income taxes in Idaho today, it's the lowest rate since 1934.
Idaho has an overcrowding problem within their state prison. We're leasing a 670-bed in southwestern Texas. Idaho has transferred 306 inmates to that facility, of course, taxpayer money. They predict to have about 700 Idaho inmates by November 1st. How will you as governor address this problem?
Well, first we got to keep our citizens safe. That's the most important thing. If we've got particularly violent criminals, they have to be incarcerated. And that's one of the most fundamental roles of state government. But we need to go way ahead of that and stop the source. And we know that 60, 70, 80% of that problem is substance abuse. And so we have to have programs, whether it's what we do and how we prescribe opioids, what we do on other illicit drugs, and most importantly, what do we do to help these people before they get into the correction system. We've got a great program in Idaho called our drug courts, but the problem is you have to break the law, you have to get into the judicial system before they take place. I want to have a program ahead of that to where if you're a parent, a teacher, a friend, a community member, and you see somebody that has a problem, we can get that problem taken before they get into our corrections and judicial system.
Okay, that brings me to my next question. Since 2014, the state of Colorado has pulled in $500 million in tax revenue from recreational marijuana. That's according to an article from CNN Money. Half of that income went into public education. What do you predict for the legal status of marijuana in Idaho, and how might any form of legalization impact citizens across the state?
We've got great laboratories of how that's working. You can go to California, Colorado, Oregon, Washington. You can go to those states and see what's happening. You can talk to those citizens, talk to the teachers, talk to the business community, talk to the people that have to find help. That's not a big problem when they're trying to go out and find help. Look at the homeless problem over there. That experiment of recreational marijuana is not going to happen under my term.
Okay. Boise State University surveyed 1,000 Idahoans on multiple issues facing Idaho, and education came out on top. 25.5% of the survey rated education in Idaho as poor. First of all, why do you think that is, and what would you do as governor to improve education?
Well, first let me address the ranking. That ranking is what they've heard, some of the dialogue that's been out there about our ranking. But go talk to parents, teachers, students about what they think about their own school. It's common for people to say, we don't like Congress, but we love our congressman or woman. A lot of that is what I believe is for whatever reason, people tend to want to denigrate it. I've been in the classrooms. I've talked to the parents. I've talked to the students, like yourself, that are going through the system. We are making great strides. The gold standard for measuring education progress is NAEP, the National Education Progress, and our NAEP scores continue to go up. If you take the ACT test and go on to college like you're about to do, our ACT scores in Idaho are up. They're above Washington, they're above surrounding states, and they continue to go up. We got a lot of work to do in education. But the problem is when you put $1 in the K-12 system, particularly at the early stages, it takes a while for that product to come out on the other end. We have got a great consensus among parents, teachers, students, the business community on what we should do in K-12 funding, and we're implementing that plan. One of the things that I want to add on to it is what we're doing in the literacy rate. We got to get all these kids reading proficiently at the end of the 3rd grade so that they're all at the starting line of life at the same level so they can have a good chance and we can continue to advance educational progress.
As many Idahoans know, you've been in the farming industry for years. I think the main question that many North Idahoans want to ask is, what will you do to benefit mining and logging industries?
Well, I've had a lot of friends over my life, and I come from a sawmill town, and we lost our major employer, which in Emmett, where Teresa and I live, which is our Boise Cascade sawmill. I was Tree Farmer of the Year one year, and you know, we produce on our ranch. We produce some timber for the market, What we need to do in Idaho is diversify and add value to every one of our industries. Whether it's the mining industry, the underground mining industry in the northern part of the state, or the phosphate mining in the southeast corner of the state. We need to continue the progress in those industries, but we need to add value to them. Those products that we produce in Idaho, we need to add value to them because every one of those industries get more efficient. Whether it's the underground mines in the Silver Valley or whether it's the phosphate mines, fewer and fewer people, but they need more and more skills are there. So we need to diversify, add value to those products, or add those software and hardware jobs and advanced manufacturing right in those communities. Because those people that have been displaced by technology have that vocational experience, that work experience. We need to take them, and whether we get them into the aerospace industry. North Idaho has a very robust aerospace industry where we're making, in some instances we're making aircraft, but a lot of places we're making parts and pieces. People that have been displaced in the mining industry, the timber industry, and agriculture are a classic group of employees for those industries.
My last question. Say one nice thing about your opponent, Paulette Jordan.
Well, I think she does a good job of representing the people in her area. She's obviously been elected to leadership of the tribe, and that's important. You know, the tribes are a big part. They were the entirety of the state of Idaho at one point in time, and it's important that we continue to have that dialogue and to have people that can do a good job of representing them to help the tribes along, you know, so that they're partners in this incredible success that we call Idaho today.
Well, this concludes our special coverage of the gubernatorial election interviews for Channel 3 News, Suddenlink Communications, and of course the Wallace High School. I'm John Webb. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and we'll catch you on the 6 o'clock news. Have a great evening.